Have you ever wondered why some people seem to navigate life with such ease, while others remain stuck in patterns of suffering despite years of meditation, affirmations, and spiritual practice? What if I told you that the most transformative spiritual insights aren't found in the light, but in the shadows, the places most teachers are afraid to take you? Welcome back to the channel. For those joining us for the first time, I've spent the last decade exploring the deepest corners of consciousness, not just in meditation retreats and workshops, but in the laboratory of my own life. And today I'm about to share 9 psychological hacks so powerful, they almost feel illegal. These aren't your typical spiritual practices. They're reality-bending techniques that operate at the edge of consciousness, where your carefully constructed identity begins to dissolve and something far more authentic emerges. But first, a warning, what I'm about to share isn't comfortable. These techniques don't validate your existing story, they dismantle it. They're not about making your current self feel better, they're about revealing who you really are beneath the mental programming. If you're ready to go beyond spiritual bypassing and positive thinking to work with the full spectrum of your consciousness, including the shadow elements most spiritual communities ignore, then stay with me. Because in the next 25 minutes, I'll share techniques that have helped thousands of my students break free from invisible mental prisons they didn't even know existed. Let me ask you something. Is there someone in your life right now who absolutely triggers you? Someone whose very presence makes your blood boil or your anxiety spike? Maybe it's a coworker, a family member, or even a public figure you've never met. Now, what if I told you that this person is actually one of your greatest spiritual teachers? Here's the truth that most spiritual teachings gloss over. Every person who triggers you is mirroring a disowned part of yourself. This isn't just poetic language, it's a psychological mechanism called projection, and it's so powerful it can completely transform how you move through the world. Think about it. That friend whose neediness irritates you, they're reflecting the part of yourself that you've suppressed because you were told neediness is weakness. That politician whose arrogance infuriates you, they're illuminating the ambition you've disowned because you were taught to be humble. The world becomes a mirror, reflecting back the fractured pieces of your psyche that you've pushed into the shadows. I discovered this in my own life years ago when I couldn't stand a new colleague at work. Everything about him, his confidence, his ease in social situations, the way he took up space in meetings, triggered something visceral in me. I found myself obsessively critiquing him in my mind, picking apart his flaws. It wasn't until months later, during a particularly intense meditation, that I realized what was happening. This man embodied qualities I had suppressed in myself since childhood, when I was told to be quiet, humble, and not draw attention to myself. My hatred wasn't about him at all. It was about the parts of myself I had disowned. This realization didn't just change my relationship with this colleague, it transformed how I understood all my relationships. Here's the hack. The next time someone triggers an emotional reaction in you, whether irritation, judgment, or even excessive admiration, pause and ask yourself, what does this reaction reveal about me? What part of myself am I seeing in this person that I've denied or suppressed? This isn't about blaming yourself or excusing others' harmful behavior. It's about recognizing that your emotional reactions are signposts pointing to your own inner work. When you feel triggered, instead of attacking or withdrawing, try this. Take a deep breath and silently say, "This is showing me something about myself." Then get curious, journal about it, meditate on it. The magic happens when you start reclaiming these disowned parts. As you integrate your shadow, those aspects of yourself you've pushed away, other people lose their power to trigger you. You become more whole, more authentic, and paradoxically more compassionate toward others. What once felt like judgment transforms into recognition. What felt like hatred transforms into understanding. You begin to see others not as enemies, but as mirrors reflecting different aspects of the infinite consciousness we all share. Now let's go deeper. Let's talk about the ultimate source of human suffering, our relationship with time. Think about the last time you felt anxious. Where was your mind? Was it replaying past mistakes, wondering what if? Or was it racing toward the future, worrying about what might happen? Here's the psychological truth that mystics have known for millennia. Suffering exists only in the past or future. The present moment is inherently free of suffering. Regret, shame, and trauma live in the past. Anxiety, fear, and worry project into the future. But the present moment, this exact point of awareness, is always whole and complete. Most people live their entire lives caught in the pendulum swing between past and future, never fully inhabiting the only moment that actually exists, now. This isn't just spiritual poetry. Neuroscience confirms that when we're fully present, the default mode network in our brain, responsible for rumination and self-referential thinking, quiets down. Our nervous system relaxes, our perception sharpens. We access states of flow and clarity that feel like liberation. I discovered this hack during one of the darkest periods of my life, when anxiety had me in a chokehold. My mind was constantly either rehashing past mistakes or catastrophizing about the future. Sleep became impossible. Peace felt like a distant memory. One night, at the height of a panic attack, something broke through. I started whispering to myself, now, now, now. With each repetition, I forced my attention back to the sensations in my body. The feeling of the floor beneath my feet, the sound of my breath, the weight of my hands. Something extraordinary happened. As I collapsed my awareness into the present moment, the anxiety, which had felt so all-consuming, simply evaporated. Not because I had solved the problems my mind was fixating on, but because I had stepped out of the time-bound thinking that created the suffering in the first place. Here's the hack. When your mind is spinning with worry or regret, whisper to yourself, now, now, now. Feel your feet on the ground. Notice the air moving in and out of your lungs. Listen to the sounds around you. Bring your full attention to this exact moment of experience. What you'll discover is that in the actual present, not the mental concept of the present, but the lived experience of now, there is no problem. There is only this moment of consciousness, which is always whole, always complete. This doesn't mean you ignore your responsibilities or stop planning for the future. It means you stop living in a mental projection of time and start operating from the power of presence. When time dissolves into the eternal now, suffering loses its foundation. What remains is the alive, vibrant experience of being, the only place where true peace can be found. Now, let's explore one of the most profound insights from both Eastern wisdom traditions and modern physics: the nature of paradox. Our minds are conditioned to think in binaries, right or wrong, good or bad, success or failure. This either-or thinking creates enormous suffering because reality simply doesn't operate this way. At the highest levels of truth, opposites not only coexist, they depend on each other. Light and dark, joy and sorrow, life and death, these aren't opposing forces but complementary aspects of a unified whole. Resisting this paradoxical nature keeps us trapped in lower mind loops, endlessly trying to choose one side over the other. I remember when this first hit me with full force. I was struggling with a major life decision and had created an agonizing mental dichotomy. Either I could pursue my creative passion and face financial insecurity, or I could choose stability and sacrifice my deepest calling. For months, I oscillated between these options, becoming increasingly paralyzed. Then, during a particularly deep meditation, something shifted in my perception. I suddenly saw that I didn't have to choose between security and passion. I could hold both intentions simultaneously. The tension between them wasn't a problem to solve, but a creative force to harness. This shift wasn't just philosophical, it was neurological. When we embrace paradox, we activate integrative networks in the brain that transcend binary thinking. We move from either-or to both and consciousness. And this opens doorways to creative solutions our linear mind could never conceive. Here's the hack. When you find yourself caught in a mental conflict, try holding both opposites as simultaneously true. Instead of thinking either this or that, consciously shift to both this and that are true. For example, I am infinitely powerful and utterly insignificant in the cosmos. I can be completely committed to my goals and totally detached from the outcome. This situation is exactly as it should be, and it needs to change. When you practice holding these paradoxes, something remarkable happens. The mind initially resists. It wants the comfort of a single answer. But as you persist, the tension between opposites creates a kind of psychological alchemy. The mind expands beyond its normal limitations. New insights emerge. Creative solutions arise. This isn't just a mental exercise, it's a portal to higher consciousness. Every spiritual tradition has recognized that transcendent awareness exists beyond the pairs of opposites. By embracing paradox rather than trying to resolve it, you align with the actual nature of reality. The next time you feel torn between opposing choices or ideas, don't rush to choose one over the other. Instead, breathe into the tension, let it expand your mind, see if you can hold both as true. What creative third option might emerge from that expanded awareness? Now let's talk about something we all face but few truly understand: the purpose of hardship and suffering in our lives. The conventional narrative tells us that pain is something to avoid, a sign that something has gone wrong. But what if our hardships aren't random or punitive? What if they're precisely calibrated to guide our evolution? Every spiritual tradition contains this insight. Difficulties aren't happening to you, they're happening for you. Your challenges aren't obstacles on your path, they are the path. When I first encountered this idea, I was skeptical. It sounded like spiritual bypassing, a way to gloss over genuine suffering. But as I applied this perspective to my own life, something profound shifted. The relationship that broke my heart, it taught me to value myself in ways nothing else could have. The career setback that devastated me, it redirected me toward my true calling. The health crisis that terrified me, it transformed my relationship with my body and mortality. Each difficulty contained a curriculum perfectly designed for my soul's evolution. Not because some external force was punishing or testing me, but because consciousness itself is always seeking growth and integration. Here's the hack. When facing a crisis or challenge, pause and ask yourself, what is this here to teach my soul? Approach your difficulty not as a victim, but as a student. Trust that there's wisdom embedded in your suffering, gold hidden in the rubble. This isn't about denying your pain or forcing toxic positivity. It's about shifting your relationship with challenge from resistance to receptivity, from why is this happening to me to what is this revealing for me? I saw this work dramatically with a student who had lost his job and was spiraling into depression and financial anxiety. When he began approaching his situation with the soul GPS perspective, he discovered that his job loss was forcing him to confront his unhealthy relationship with security and status. The very things he feared losing were what had kept him from pursuing his deeper purpose. Within months of this perspective shift, he had launched a business aligned with his values and was experiencing a level of fulfillment his previous career had never provided. The crisis that seemed like his undoing became the doorway to his rebirth. Again, this isn't magical thinking. It's a radical shift in how you relate to difficulty. Instead of seeing challenges as punishment or bad luck, you recognize them as evolutionary catalysts. Exactly what your soul needs for its next level of awakening. This doesn't mean you passively accept harmful situations. Sometimes the wisdom in your difficulty is precisely to teach you to set boundaries or make necessary changes. But it does mean you stop fighting reality and start mining it for meaning. When you trust that your challenges contain soul-level guidance, suffering transforms from something to escape into something to engage with consciously. The universe becomes not a random series of events, but a loving teacher guiding you home to yourself. Let's talk about something our culture desperately tries to avoid: death. Not just physical death, but the countless small deaths our ego experiences throughout life. The death of relationships, identities, beliefs, and dreams. Most spiritual teachings gloss over death's transformative power in favor of more palatable topics. But the truth is, nothing shifts perspective more radically than confronting mortality. Ancient wisdom traditions understood this. The Stoics practiced memento mori, remembering you will die. Buddhist monks meditated in charnel grounds surrounded by decomposing bodies. These weren't morbid practices, but profound psychological tools for awakening. Why? Because death awareness cuts through the trivial concerns that consume our days and clarifies what truly matters. It's the ultimate perspective shifter. I discovered this after losing someone close to me unexpectedly. In the raw aftermath of grief, something strange happened. The world became more vivid. Petty worries that had consumed me for years suddenly seemed absurd. Relationships became precious, time became sacred. This heightened awareness gradually faded as I returned to normal life. But I realized I didn't have to wait for loss to access this clarity. I could intentionally cultivate it through contemplating my own mortality. Here's the hack. Each day, spend 60 seconds visualizing your own death. Not in a fearful way, but with calm awareness. Imagine your body returning to the elements. See your concerns, achievements, and identity dissolving into stardust. Then ask yourself, if I died tonight, what would I regret not saying or doing? What am I postponing that cannot wait? This isn't a morbid practice, it's a liberation technique. By befriending death, you rob it of its unconscious power over you. You stop postponing authenticity and purpose for some imagined future that isn't guaranteed. A student once told me she'd been putting off reconciling with her estranged sister for years. After just 2 weeks of practicing the death meditation, she found herself picking up the phone. I suddenly realized that my pride wasn't worth dying with this regret, she said. Their reconciliation became one of the most healing experiences of her life. When death becomes your advisor rather than your enemy, your priorities clarify. The masks you wear in social situations feel suddenly heavy and unnecessary. The grudges you carry reveal themselves as burdens you can no longer afford. The dreams you've deferred take on a new urgency. This practice doesn't increase fear, it actually reduces it. By consciously confronting the reality we all try to avoid, you transcend the unconscious anxiety that drives so much of human behavior. You start living with the awareness that each moment is simultaneously precious and fleeting. Let death be your teacher. Let it strip away everything inessential until you stand face to face with what truly matters in your brief, miraculous existence. Now let's explore perhaps the most radical insight from both spiritual traditions and modern psychology: the fluid nature of identity. From early childhood, we're conditioned to believe we are our name, our story, our personality traits, our job title, our relationships, our beliefs. We build a mental structure called me and then defend it at all costs. But what if this solid sense of self is actually an illusion? What if your identity is more like a river than a rock, constantly flowing, never the same from moment to moment? Every wisdom tradition points to this truth. You are not your thoughts, emotions, or sensations. You're not even your consistent personality patterns. You are the awareness experiencing all of these, the consciousness within which the entire show of me appears. I remember the first time this shifted from intellectual concept to lived experience. I was on a silent retreat, tracking my thoughts for hours on end. Suddenly, something broke open. I realized I wasn't generating these thoughts. They were simply arising in consciousness, like clouds in the sky. The I that I had always identified with was itself just another thought appearing in awareness. This wasn't a dissociative experience. It was a recognition of something both ordinary and profound. My true nature was the space in which all experience occurs, not any particular experience itself. Here's the hack. Throughout your day, practice repeating silently, I am not this, I am not this, while scanning various aspects of your experience. When a thought arises, I am not this thought. When an emotion wells up, I am not this emotion. When your body feels pleasure or pain, I am not this sensation. Then shift attention to the awareness in which all these experiences are appearing. Feel yourself as the boundless space around your form, rather than the form itself. This practice disrupts the automatic identification with the contents of consciousness. And when this identification loosens, something extraordinary happens. A sense of spaciousness and freedom emerges. Identity becomes a game you play, rather than a prison that contains you. A student once described her experience with this practice. It was like I had been living in a single room my whole life, believing it was the entire universe. Suddenly I realized I could step outside and discover an infinite landscape I never knew existed. This doesn't mean you stop participating in your human story. You still have preferences, relationships, and responsibilities, but you hold them lightly, knowing they're temporary expressions rather than your fundamental identity. When identity becomes liquid rather than solid, suffering loses its grip. Criticism doesn't wound you so deeply because you're not identified with the self being criticized. Loss doesn't devastate you because you recognize that everything in form is transient. Even physical pain is experienced differently when you're not completely identified with the body. The person you take yourself to be, with all its history, problems, and achievements, is revealed as just one of infinite possible expressions of consciousness, and in that recognition lies a freedom beyond imagination. Let's talk about a practice that's been so commercialized in spiritual circles that we've for radical power: gratitude. Most of us approach gratitude as a kind of spiritual accounting, listing things we're thankful for to boost our mood or attract more abundance. While there's nothing wrong with this, it barely scratches the surface of gratitude's transformative potential. True gratitude isn't just an attitude or a practice, it's a complete shift in perception that literally alters your neurochemistry and energetic field. It's not something you do, it's something you become. Ancient wisdom traditions understood that gratitude isn't just polite, it's alchemical. It transforms the ordinary into the sacred. It shifts your vibrational frequency from scarcity to abundance, from separation to connection. I experienced this after a period of profound depression when nothing in my spiritual toolkit seemed to be working. One morning, out of desperation, I tried something different. Instead of just listing things I was grateful for, I tried to embody gratitude with my entire being. I walked outside and imagined that everything, the wind, the trees, the birds, the strangers passing by, was a gift being offered directly to me. I let myself feel overwhelmed by the generosity of existence itself. Something extraordinary happened. My perception literally shifted. Colours became more vivid, sounds more textured. The weight of self-concern that had been suffocating me lifted, replaced palpable sense of connection to everything around me. This wasn't a temporary mood boost. It was a complete recalibration of my relationship with reality. Here's the hack. Instead of just listing things you're grateful for, practice becoming gratitude itself. Walk through your day as if everything is conspiring in your favor. Feel as if the wind is kissing you. Food is gifting itself to nourish your body, and strangers are secret angels placed on your path for a divine purpose. This isn't about denying life's challenges. It's about shifting your baseline perception from life is happening to me to life is happening for me, from I need to get more to I already have everything. A student who practiced this during a particularly difficult financial period shared something remarkable. I started walking through stores, blessing everything I couldn't afford instead of feeling resentful or deprived. Within weeks, unexpected opportunities started appearing in my life. It wasn't magical thinking, my whole energy had shifted, and people could feel it. What science now confirms, mystics have always known. Gratitude creates measurable changes in your brain, immune system, and electromagnetic field. It increases neuroplasticity, strengthens neural pathways associated with positive experience, and even alters how others respond to you. When you bless life, life blesses you back. Not because you're manipulating some cosmic vending machine, but because you're aligning with reality's fundamental nature, which is abundance. Try this. For just one day, walk through your life in a state of radical gratitude. See every person, object, and situation as a gift, even the challenging ones. Watch what shifts in both your inner experience and your outer circumstances. Now let's explore one of the most powerful psychological tools from contemplative traditions, the practice of witnessing consciousness. Most of us are completely identified with the contents of our minds, our thoughts, emotions, sensations, and stories. We believe we are our mental activity. But what if your thoughts and emotions are more like weather patterns moving through the sky of your awareness? What if the real you is the sky, not the weather? Every wisdom tradition contains some version of this insight. You are not your mental emotional drama. You are the awareness in which this drama unfolds. This isn't just a philosophical distinction, it's a complete shift in how you relate to your inner experience. I discovered this during a period of intense anxiety when my mind was constantly catastrophizing about the future. Traditional approaches like positive thinking or distraction offered only temporary relief. The breakthrough came when I stopped trying to change my thoughts and started observing them instead. As I practiced witnessing my mental activity without identifying with it, something profound shifted. The thoughts didn't necessarily stop, but they lost their power over me. I discovered a dimension of myself, pure awareness, that remained untouched by the storm of anxiety. Here's the hack. Throughout your day, practice mentally labeling your thoughts and emotions as they arise, without judging or trying to change them. Planning, judging, worrying, remembering. See if you can notice the thoughts without becoming the thoughts. A helpful visualization is to imagine your thoughts as clouds passing through the clear blue sky of your awareness. They may be dark storm clouds or light wispy ones, but they're all just temporary weather, not the sky itself. The more you practice witnessing, the more you realize a profound truth. I am not my mind. The real I is the unchanging awareness in which all mental activity appears. A student who struggled with decades of self-critical thinking described her experience with this practice. For the first time, I realized I wasn't actually the voice in my head constantly telling me I wasn't good enough. I was the one who could hear that voice, and that changed everything. This isn't about dissociating from your experience or suppressing emotions. It's about discovering your essential nature as awareness itself, the silent witness that remains constant amidst all changing phenomena. When you disentangle your identity from your mental narrative, suffering transforms. External circumstances may remain unchanged, but your relationship to them shifts completely. You stop being tossed around by every thought and emotion. You find an unshakable center of peace that exists independent of mental weather. This doesn't mean you become passive or disconnected. Paradoxically, when you're not completely identified with your thoughts and emotions, you can engage with life more effectively. You respond rather than react. You choose rather than compulsively follow mental patterns. As you strengthen this witness consciousness, you'll discover that the sky of your awareness is vast enough to hold any storm and remains untouched by whatever passes through it. Now let's explore something counterintuitive, the power of emptiness. In a culture obsessed with accumulation of knowledge, achievements, experiences, possessions, we've forgotten that true growth requires emptying, not adding. Most spiritual seekers are constantly trying to improve themselves, reading more books, attending more workshops, accumulating more techniques. But what if the real transformation comes not from filling yourself up, but from emptying out? Ancient wisdom traditions understood this paradox. The Tao Te Ching says, to become full, first be empty. The Christian mystics spoke of kenosis, self-emptying, as the path to divine union. Zen masters point to muxing, no mind, as the doorway to enlightenment. I discovered this after years of spiritual seeking that had become its own form of achievement. I was accumulating practices and insights like trophies, yet feeling increasingly hollow. The breakthrough came when I finally surrendered, not in defeat, but in a profound recognition that my striving itself was the obstacle. Here's the hack. Each morning, practice the prayer of the empty cup. Simply whisper to yourself, I am nothing, I am everything, use me. Feel yourself emptying of all preconceptions, identities, and agendas. Become a vessel for life to flow through rather than a controller, forcing outcomes. This isn't about diminishing yourself. It's about recognizing that your small, constructed self, with all its plans and strategies, is infinitely less intelligent than the universal consciousness that breathes through you when you get out of the way. A student who had been struggling to make a creative project work shared her experience. For months, I forced myself to sit at my desk every day, pushing through resistance. Nothing worthwhile emerged. After practicing the empty cup prayer, I stopped trying so hard. Suddenly, ideas began flowing through me with an ease I'd never experienced before. When you surrender the need to figure everything out, to control outcomes, to be somebody special, something magical happens. Synchronicities replace struggle. Intuitive guidance replaces mental planning. You tap into a flow state where life moves through you rather than by you. This isn't about becoming passive. It's about recognizing the difference between ego-driven action and inspired action, between forcing and allowing, between the limited intelligence of your conditioned mind and the vast intelligence of life itself. Try this. For one day, approach your life from a place of complete inner surrender. Before each activity, silently affirm, I don't know how to do this. I'm empty and ready to be guided. Notice what shifts in your experience and in the results of your actions. As you practice emptying, you'll discover the paradoxical truth. Only when you're empty can you be truly full. Only when you surrender control do you access true power. Only when you stop trying to become something can you discover what you already are. Finally, let's explore what I consider the most powerful psychological hack of all, one that can completely revolutionize your experience in just 24 hours. Every spiritual tradition points to the same ultimate truth: separation is an illusion. At the deepest level of reality, all is one. But this usually remains an abstract concept rather than a lived experience. What if you could turn this metaphysical insight into a practical experiment that transforms how you move through the world? Here's the nuclear level hack. For 24 hours, act as if everyone you encounter is you in another body. Not metaphorically or philosophically, but literally. The rude driver cutting you off, the crying child on the airplane, the arrogant CEO, the homeless person on the corner. All are fragments of your infinite soul experiencing different aspects of the human journey. Approach each interaction from this truth. Speak to others as if you are speaking to another version of yourself. Listen as if you are listening to yourself. Serve as if you are serving yourself. I first tried this as a desperate experiment during a period of intense interpersonal conflict. I was locked in bitter resentment towards several people and couldn't find my way out through conventional forgiveness practices. The shift was immediate and disorienting. As I looked at the person I had seen as my adversary and genuinely viewed them as myself in another body, with all their fears, wounds, and confusion, my anger simply dissolved. Not because I was suppressing it, but because it had lost its foundation in the illusion of separateness. A student practiced this at a difficult family gathering that normally left her drained and resentful. I looked at my critical mother and thought, that's just me, playing the role of the critical mother in this lifetime. I looked at my brother's addiction issues and thought, that's me, experiencing the path of addiction. Something profound shifted. Not only did I feel compassion instead of judgment, but they actually responded to me differently without me saying anything about what I was doing. This isn't a thought experiment, it's a direct challenge to the illusion of separation that creates most human suffering. When you recognize others as yourself having a different experience, compassion becomes your natural state. Forgiveness becomes unnecessary because there's no one separate from you to forgive. Your fundamental relationship with humanity transforms. The unity experiment doesn't require spiritual beliefs. Quantum physics and neuroscience increasingly suggest that separation is indeed an illusion created by our limited perception. Practicing this hack doesn't require you to believe in metaphysical oneness, just to experiment with perceiving and acting from that perspective for 24 hours. Notice how this shift in perception affects not only your inner experience, but also how others respond to you. Watch walls of defensiveness dissolve. Observe how aggression loses its foothold when met with the recognition of shared identity. This doesn't mean you excuse harmful behavior or abandon discernment. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for another aspect of yourself is to set clear boundaries. But those boundaries are no longer erected in fear or judgment. They come from the same love you would show yourself. We've explored 9 psychological hacks that operate at the edge of consciousness, techniques that challenge our conventional understanding of reality and identity. From recognizing others as mirrors of our disowned parts, to dissolving time, from embracing paradox to befriending death, each of these practices offers a portal to a more authentic, liberated way of being. These aren't techniques to simply make your current self feel better. They're invitations to discover who you really are beneath the layers of conditioning and limited perception. The dark side of spirituality isn't about negativity or pessimism. It's about having the courage to work with the full spectrum of consciousness, including the shadow elements that most spiritual communities ignore. It's about transcending the polarity of light and dark to embrace the wholeness that includes both. My invitation to you is this: choose just one of these hacks to experiment with over the next week. Notice how it affects your perception, your relationships, your sense of self. Journal about your experiences. Be curious about what emerges. Remember, these aren't just intellectual concepts to understand, they're experiential gateways to a different quality of consciousness. Their power lies not in believing them, but in practicing them. The spiritual path isn't about becoming more spiritual. It's about becoming more real, more authentic, more whole, more alive. It's about removing the barriers between yourself and life, between yourself and others, between yourself and the truth of who you really are. The greatest liberation comes not from transcending your humanity, but from embracing it fully, shadows and all. Not from escaping the world, but from recognizing yourself in it.